I watched the handcuffs click around my wrists. Actual handcuffs, cold steel biting into my skin, and all I could think was that I'd parked 3 feet too close to a fire hydrant. 3 feet. That was the entire reason Sheriff Michael Hendricks was now reading me my rights in the parking lot of the Riverside Shopping Center on a Tuesday afternoon. But by the time it was all over, he'd lose his job, his pension would be frozen, and I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office with surveillance footage that would make national news. The worst part? I'd done absolutely nothing wrong, and it took a man's entire career imploding for anyone to care that I was telling the truth. But let me back up. Let me tell you who I was before all of this, before the arrest, before the headlines, before my face became the picture they used to talk about racial profiling in rural America. My name is Ashley Morgan. I'm 34 years old, a dental hygienist at Bright Smile Family Dentistry on Maple Street, and I've lived in Millbrook, Tennessee for the last 9 years. It's the kind of town where everybody knows your business, which sounds charming until your business becomes public spectacle. I'd moved here after my divorce, needed a fresh start. Somewhere quiet where nobody knew about the bankruptcy or the failed marriage, or the fact that I'd spent 2 years in therapy learning to trust people again. Millbrook had seemed perfect. Population 8,400, tree-lined streets, a town square with a gazebo, the kind of place where people still held doors open and said good morning without irony. My apartment was a small 2-bedroom on Elm Avenue, nothing fancy, beige carpet, white walls, but it was mine, and I decorated it carefully. There was a navy blue couch I'd saved 3 months for, a bookshelf filled with romance novels and memoirs, a kitchen where I liked to cook on Sunday afternoons with a podcast playing in the background. My bedroom had white curtains that let in the morning light just right, and every morning I'd wake up at 6:15 a.m., shower, make a green smoothie, and feel something like peace. This was my ritual. This was what I'd built after everything fell apart. At work, I was good with patients. People liked me. I had a way of making the nervous ones feel safe, of joking with the regulars, of remembering that Mrs. Patterson's daughter had just gotten married, or that Tommy Chen was worried about his SATs. My boss, Dr. Ramirez, had given me a raise 2 years running. I was reliable, punctual, and I took pride in what I did. On weekends, I'd meet my friend Keisha for coffee, or I'd visit my mom in Nashville, or I'd just sit at home and read. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was stable. It was honest. It was mine. That Tuesday morning had been completely ordinary. I'd worked a full schedule at the clinic, 7 patients, 2 root canal appointments, 1 deep cleaning. By 2:30 p.m., I was tired but not exhausted, and I needed to pick up a few things from the grocery store and the pharmacy. My blood pressure medication was running low, and I wanted to grab some ingredients for the jambalaya I was planning to make for my mom's birthday dinner on Sunday. I'd parked my 2015 Honda Civic in the Riverside Shopping Center lot, right near the entrance to the pharmacy. The lot was maybe half full. There were plenty of spaces. I didn't even notice the fire hydrant at first. I was thinking about whether to get shrimp or chicken for the jambalaya, mentally running through my recipe, not paying attention to anything but the list in my phone. I parked, grabbed my purse, and went into the pharmacy. 15 minutes later, I was back at my car with my prescriptions and a bottle of vanilla extract. That's when I saw him. Sheriff Hendricks was standing next to my car, writing something on a clipboard. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of broad shoulders that come from years of wearing a uniform. He had gray at his temples and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lot of time outdoors. He looked up when I approached, and I noticed his eyes were a cold blue-gray, the kind that didn't seem particularly interested in my existence. "This your vehicle?" he asked, not as a question but as a statement. "Yes, it is," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't correct me about the title, didn't say sheriff, didn't say anything. He just pointed at my front bumper, which was indeed closer to the fire hydrant than it should have been. "You're parked too close to the hydrant. That's a violation." I looked at the space. My bumper was maybe 2-3 feet from the hydrant at most. The lot was nearly empty. There were dozens of other spaces, and I'd chosen one that happened to be slightly too close to safety equipment. It was a mistake, sure, but it seemed like the kind of thing that merited a warning, not whatever he was writing up. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I didn't realize. I can move my car right now if you'd like. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. I'm black, and I'm always aware of that fact in situations like this, though I hate that I'm aware of it. I hate that a traffic stop makes me calculate the tone of my voice, the position of my hands, whether my expression seems threatening or submissive. That's a weight that shouldn't exist, but it does. I saw something flicker across his face when he looked at me, something that might have been recognition or judgment or just the blank expression of someone doing their job. "You're getting a ticket," he said flatly, "and if you don't move that car in the next 5 minutes, I'll have it towed." Then he walked away before I could say anything else. I sat there for a moment, processing the interaction. It had been rude, certainly, and unnecessarily harsh, but it was also just a traffic ticket. People got traffic tickets. It wasn't a big deal. I moved my car to a better spot, one that was absolutely unquestionably legal, grabbed my pharmacy bag, and went home. I didn't think much about it. I filed the ticket away in my glove compartment with the vague intention of paying it the next day. It cost $75, which was annoying but not catastrophic. I had a full-time job. I could afford it. That should have been the end of the story. But that night, I got a call from my friend Keisha. She worked at the county clerk's office, and she'd heard something that made her want to check in with me. Apparently, Cruz Hendricks had filed a report saying I'd been hostile during a traffic stop and that he'd felt threatened by my behavior. The report mentioned that I'd refused to cooperate and that my vehicle was parked in a suspicious manner near essential infrastructure. It was written in that careful, neutral language that law enforcement uses when they want to make something sound worse than it was. "It's probably nothing," Keisha had said over the phone, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "But I wanted you to know, in case it becomes something." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept turning it over in my head, the interaction, his words, the way he'd looked at me. I'd been nothing but polite. I'd apologized. I'd admitted fault. What was there to be hostile about? But the seed had been planted. Something was wrong. Something was off. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really about a parking spot at all. The next morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd spent the night on my kitchen floor, staring at the police report Keisha had sent me, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. The fake hostile behavior, the fabricated, suspicious manner claim, the lies written in that careful, neutral law enforcement language that somehow made fiction sound like fact. By sunrise, I had called 3 attorneys. By noon, I had an appointment with James Whitmore, a civil rights lawyer who specialized in cases involving law enforcement misconduct. His office was downtown, in a brick building that had probably been built in the 1970s, with a waiting room that smelled like old coffee and determination. James himself was in his early 60s, black, with the kind of tired eyes that come from fighting the same battles for decades. When I showed him the report, he didn't say much at first. He just read it, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. "This is thin," he said finally, looking up at me over his reading glasses. "But it's also the beginning of a pattern. You said he threatened to have your car towed." "Yes, I was being compliant. I moved my car immediately after he told me to." "Did anyone see this interaction?" "I don't know. The parking lot was pretty empty, but there might have been someone." James leaned back in his chair and folded his hands across his stomach. "Here's what I need you to do. Go to that shopping center. Check if they have security cameras. If they do, request the footage from that day. I'll send you a formal records request letter. It's much harder for them to refuse when it's legal. We need to see exactly what happened, because right now, it's your word against his, and the sheriff's report makes it sound like you're the one with the problem." The week that followed was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I found out that Riverside Shopping Center did have security cameras, and after submitting James's official records request, the management company agreed to provide the footage. Watching that video was surreal. There I was on the screen, small and grainy, parking my car, getting out, walking to the pharmacy. The angle was perfect. You could see exactly how far my bumper was from the hydrant. It was close, sure, but not aggressively so. And then there was Sheriff Hendricks, arriving just as I was coming back out with my prescription bag. You could see him write the ticket, see me approach him, see me speak politely, see him gesture dismissively at my car. What you couldn't see was any hostility on my part. What you couldn't see was anything that remotely justified the report he'd filed. I showed the video to James, and he watched it 3 times before he sat back and exhaled slowly. "This is gold," he said quietly. "This is not just exoneration. This is proof of falsification of an official report. He didn't just stop you inappropriately, he documented a lie about it." But then came the complication. 2 days after James contacted the sheriff's office with the video evidence, I got a call from Dr. Ramirez at the dental clinic. His voice was strange, apologetic, but formal in a way he'd never been before. "Ashley, I need to talk to you about something," he said. "I got a call from Sheriff Hendricks this morning. He was asking questions about your work history, your reliability, whether you've ever had any behavioral issues at the clinic." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that you're one of my most reliable employees. But Ashley, I'm not going to lie to you. The fact that he's calling around asking about you, it seems like he's trying to build something. I wanted you to know." That was the moment I understood what was happening. Hendricks wasn't just going to let this go. He wasn't just going to accept that the video proved he was wrong. He was going to escalate. He was going to try to make me the problem instead. That same afternoon, I got a call from my landlord. He'd received a visit from a sheriff's deputy, asking questions about my tenancy, whether I'd ever caused trouble, whether there had been any complaints. My landlord, thank God, was a good man. He called me immediately and told me everything. "They're trying to discredit you," James said when I told him. "This is actually a known tactic. When law enforcement gets caught in a lie, sometimes they double down. They try to build a narrative where you're an unreliable person, someone whose word can't be trusted. So even when they're caught on video, it becomes a he said, she said situation." But James had a plan. He filed a formal complaint with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, citing the falsified report and the apparent campaign to discredit me. He also sent a cease and desist letter to Sheriff Hendricks, warning him that any further inquiries about my character or employment could constitute harassment and defamation. The letter was polite. The letter was professional. The letter was absolutely devastating. Within 48 hours, the inquiries stopped. But the damage, in a way, had already been done. I was exhausted, I was angry, and I was done being passive. "I want to press charges," I told James in his office one afternoon about 2 weeks after the shopping center incident. "I want to sue him. I want everyone to know what he did." James was quiet for a moment. He had the kind of face that didn't show much, but I could see him thinking. "That's your right," he said finally. "But I want you to understand what that means. This becomes public. Your name, his name, everything gets dragged into the light. It becomes a story. And stories like this, they have a way of spreading." "I don't care," I said. "He lied. He falsified a police report. He tried to destroy my reputation. I'm not letting him get away with it." "I'm not saying don't do it," James said. "I'm saying understand what you're choosing. You're choosing to fight back. That's brave. But it's also going to cost you. Emotionally, maybe financially, definitely in terms of your privacy. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the nights I couldn't sleep, the way I'd look over my shoulder in the parking lot at work, the shame I felt even though I'd done nothing wrong. I thought about how he'd tried to make me the problem when he was the one who'd lied. And I nodded. "I'm ready," I said. James began preparing the lawsuit on a Monday morning in late September. He filed it in county court, naming Sheriff Michael Hendricks and the county sheriff's office as defendants. The complaint alleged falsification of an official report, malicious prosecution, abuse of authority, and defamation. It requested damages and a formal finding that the report was fabricated. The filing was public record. Within 24 hours, it was everywhere. The local news picked it up first, a small story on the evening broadcast about a dental hygienist suing a sheriff for a false arrest report related to a parking violation. But then the story started to grow legs. Someone at a national news outlet saw it and decided to investigate further. They reached out to James, who agreed to an interview. They also reached out to Sheriff Hendricks, who, in what James later told me was a catastrophic mistake, agreed to comment. Standing in front of the camera, in uniform, Hendricks insisted that the report was accurate, that I had been hostile, that he had felt threatened. He said he was standing by his actions and that this lawsuit was frivolous and an attack on law enforcement doing its job. Except there was a problem. The video existed. It was already being shared on social media, and once Hendricks made his statement on camera, denying everything I was claiming, people started comparing his words to the actual footage. The contrast was stark. The video showed exactly what I'd said: a polite interaction, no hostility, a minor parking violation handled with unnecessary severity, and then documented with lies. Within 48 hours, his statement had gone viral. Within a week, it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. "Sheriff's false report caught on camera," the headlines read. "Viral video shows law enforcement falsifying police reports." My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted to use my case as an example of systemic issues. I gave a few interviews, carefully, with James's guidance, sticking to the facts and avoiding anything that could be twisted or used against me later. But the story had taken on a life of its own. Then came the kicker. A journalist from the Nashville Gazette decided to do a deeper dive into Sheriff Hendricks's record. What they found was stunning. Over the previous 7 years, there had been 12 other complaints filed against him, allegations of excessive force, racial bias in traffic stops, and inappropriate behavior. Most had been dismissed or settled quietly. But now, with the spotlight on him, those cases started to resurface. Lawyers representing people from those previous incidents reached out to James, asking if they could join the lawsuit as additional claimants. Within 3 weeks, the case had grown from one lawsuit to a class action situation with 5 additional plaintiffs, all of them black, all of them alleging similar patterns of behavior from Hendricks. The county's legal department, recognizing the danger, began distancing itself from Hendricks. They hired their own outside counsel to review his conduct, and that's when everything fell apart for him. The investigation found that not only was my report falsified, but at least 3 of the other complaints had been similarly documented with inaccurate information. Hendricks had a pattern of writing reports that didn't match the circumstances, a pattern of targeting drivers based on race, a pattern of lying. The county moved quickly to protect itself. They suspended him with pay pending the outcome of the investigation. They issued a public statement saying they took the allegations seriously and were cooperating fully with authorities. And they quietly started negotiating a settlement. 3 months after I filed the lawsuit, James called me with news. "They want to settle," he said. "County's offering $350,000, a full apology, and a promise that Hendricks will be terminated once the investigation concludes." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "I recommend you take it," James said. "Not because it's perfect, it's not, but because it's justice, and justice is rarely perfect. The money acknowledges the harm. The apology becomes part of the public record, and Hendricks's career is over. That matters." We accepted the settlement. The county issued a formal written apology, which they read aloud at a press conference. They announced that an independent investigation had found merit to the allegations against Sheriff Hendricks, and that he would be terminated, effective immediately. His pension would be reviewed, with the possibility of forfeiture if the investigation substantiated the pattern of misconduct. And the settlement included a clause that barred him from ever working in law enforcement again in the state of Tennessee. The day the settlement was announced, I sat in my apartment and cried. Not tears of joy exactly, but tears of release. The weight I'd been carrying for months, the injustice, the anger, the fear, finally lifted. It wasn't that everything was suddenly okay. It wasn't that the experience hadn't changed me. It was that I'd stopped being a victim of what had happened and had become instead a person who had survived it, who had fought back, who had won. Keisha came over that night with a bottle of wine and takeout from our favorite Thai place. We sat on my couch, the one I'd saved 3 months for, and she raised her glass. "To Ashley Morgan," she said, "who didn't take anyone's shit." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "To not taking shit," I agreed. But the aftermath wasn't clean. Hendricks didn't just disappear quietly. In the weeks following his termination, he gave an interview to a conservative news outlet, claiming he was a victim of cancel culture, that the investigation was politically motivated, that I had orchestrated everything to attack law enforcement. He tried to paint himself as a martyr. But the narrative had already been set. The video existed. The evidence existed. His own words on camera contradicting the footage existed. Very few people believed him. More importantly, very few people cared. 6 months after the settlement, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice, older, tired, said, "Is this Ashley Morgan?" "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Barbara Hendricks, Michael's ex-wife." My first instinct was to hang up, but something made me stay on the line. "I wanted to apologize," she continued, "for what my ex-husband did to you. I saw the video, I saw the news stories, and I wanted you to know that I'm not surprised. Not surprised at all. He's always been like this, quick to anger, quick to blame other people when things don't go his way. I left him 10 years ago because of it. I just wanted you to know that what he did to you wasn't about you. It was about him." I didn't know what to say. "Thank you for calling," I managed finally. "One more thing," she said. "He lost his job, he lost his pension. He's living in a trailer outside of town, drinking most days. His own son won't talk to him. I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you this so you know that he's facing consequences. Real ones. He's not okay." After she hung up, I sat with that information. I'd wanted justice. I'd gotten it. But hearing about his life falling apart didn't make me feel satisfied or vindicated. It just made me sad. Sad that it had taken this. Sad that his career had to implode. Sad that any of it had happened at all. But I also knew something else. I'd done the right thing. Not for revenge, but for truth. Not to destroy him, but to protect other people from what he'd done to me. A year after the settlement, I moved to a new apartment in Nashville, closer to my mom. I decided to leave Millbrook. Too many memories there, too many people who knew the story, too much of my identity tied up in being the woman who sued the sheriff. I wanted to be just Ashley again, the dental hygienist, the woman who read books on her couch and made jambalaya for Sunday dinners. I found a new job at a clinic near Vanderbilt, and I made new friends. Life slowly became normal again, quiet, steady, mine. On the first morning in my new apartment, I sat on a balcony overlooking a green space, a cup of coffee in my hands, and I thought about that Tuesday in the parking lot. I thought about how a 3-foot parking mistake had somehow changed my entire life, had forced me to become braver than I wanted to be, had shown me that I was capable of things I didn't know I could do. The coffee was warm and exactly the right temperature. It didn't taste like ashes or bitterness. It tasted like coffee. And for the first time in over a year, I could simply enjoy it without thinking about parking spots, false reports, or sheriffs with cold gray eyes. I was finally free. Not because the system had suddenly become just, it hadn't, but because I had refused to let injustice define me. And that, I realized, was something no badge and no lie could ever take away.